The bus rolled through winding mountain roads, the morning mist curling around the windows like a living thing. I sat by the window, my coffee cooling in my hands, watching the sun slowly bleed through the clouds. It had been years since we'd taken a family trip, years since my son had asked me to go anywhere with him at all. He sat across the aisle, talking to his younger cousins, his laughter soft and unguarded in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager. There was something in the way he looked at me that morning, a quiet warmth, but also a mystery, as if he knew something I didn't. When he called last week, his voice carried a rare excitement. "Mom, I'm planning a short family trip. Just us. You need a break." I hadn't questioned it. Maybe I was too tired to. Life had been a long list of routines, early mornings, quiet dinners alone, memories tucked away in old photo albums. So when he insisted I pack light and wear comfortable shoes, I did as he said, not realizing this trip would become something far more than I expected. As we passed the valley, the scenery unfolded like a painting. Lush fields glistened with dew, and small wooden cottages dotted the hillside. My son leaned over and pointed. "Remember that place, Mom?" I squinted through the glass. It was an old guest house we'd stayed in years ago, when his father was still with us. He must have been about 8 then, his shoes too big, his laughter echoing off the lake as he chased dragonflies. My throat tightened. "You remember that?" I whispered. He smiled, that same crooked grin that always reminded me of his father. "Of course. You packed my favorite snacks for that trip. I threw most of them in the lake." We both laughed, and for a moment, time folded back on itself. Later, when we stopped for lunch near a small village, he surprised me by pulling out an old camera, my late husband's camera. I hadn't seen it in years. "I fixed it," he said simply, brushing the dust off the lens. "Thought you might want to use it again." My hands trembled as I took it. The leather strap was worn, the lens slightly scratched, but when I looked through it, everything around me felt sharper, more alive. Children ran past, the scent of pine drifted through the air, and somewhere nearby, someone was playing an old folk tune on a flute. I snapped a picture of my son as he looked toward the mountains. The shutter clicked softly, sealing that instant forever. I didn't know it then, but that was the beginning of something, an unfolding of emotions long buried beneath years of silence and distance. There was tenderness in the air, a quiet pull that told me this trip wasn't just about rest. It was about remembrance, about something he wanted to show me, something I wasn't ready to face yet. The next morning, the soft hum of the river outside our cabin woke me before sunrise. The air was crisp, and the scent of wet pine drifted through the half-open window. My son was already up, standing on the porch, a steaming mug in his hands. The faint orange glow of dawn touched his face, and for a fleeting second, I saw the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and muddy shoes. "Couldn't sleep?" I asked, stepping beside him. He smiled faintly, eyes fixed on the horizon. "Just wanted to watch the sunrise with you, like we used to." His voice held something tender, almost nostalgic. I hadn't realized he remembered those mornings from his childhood, when we'd sit outside with a blanket wrapped around us, sharing quiet moments before the world woke up. We spent the day exploring the nearby trails. The path was covered with autumn leaves that crunched beneath our shoes, and sunlight filtered through the branches, painting golden patterns on the forest floor. My son walked ahead but kept glancing back, making sure I wasn't left behind. Every time he did, he smiled, a small, reassuring smile that felt strangely protective. He pointed out wildflowers, picked up stones shaped like hearts, and occasionally paused to take pictures. There was something deliberate in his every move, as though he was leading me somewhere with purpose, not just wandering aimlessly. When we reached a clearing, he stopped. In the middle stood an old wooden bench, weathered by rain and time. My breath caught when I saw the initials carved into its backrest, his father's and mine. I remembered that bench vividly. It was where we'd sat years ago, laughing as our son tried to skip stones across the lake. My eyes welled up as I ran my fingers over the rough carving. "You brought me here on purpose," I whispered. He nodded softly. "Dad told me about this place. Said it was your favorite spot." The sound of his voice cracked slightly, and I realized then that this trip wasn't about sightseeing. It was about connection, about preserving memories before they faded away. He sat down beside me, silent for a while, then pulled something from his backpack, a small wooden box. "I found this in the attic," he said, handing it to me. Inside were old photographs, faded but familiar. Pictures of birthdays, family picnics, and moments I thought were long forgotten. There was one photo of me holding him as a baby, his tiny hands gripping my necklace. He traced the edges of the photo with his thumb and whispered, "You've always been my anchor, Mom." I couldn't speak. The weight of unspoken years pressed against my chest. As the wind rustled the leaves around us, I realized that my son wasn't just showing me places from the past, he was showing me pieces of myself I had lost along the way. The woman who once laughed freely, who believed in small joys, who loved deeply and without hesitation. And somehow, through his quiet thoughtfulness, he was giving her back to me. That evening, after dinner, the family gathered around the fire pit outside the cabin. The sky was clear, the stars scattered like diamonds against a deep velvet night. The air buzzed with the faint crackle of burning wood, and laughter echoed from the younger cousins playing by the riverbank. My son sat beside me, his face illuminated by the warm orange light. He had been unusually quiet since we returned from the lake earlier, his hands fidgeting as if he were working up the courage to say something. I waited, sensing that whatever he was holding inside had been building throughout the trip. The soft breeze carried the smell of pine and smoke, and in that quiet, sacred space, he finally spoke. "Mom," he began, his voice low and steady, "do you remember the last time we came here as a family?" I nodded, my throat tightening. "I remember everything. You fell in the lake, and your father couldn't stop laughing." He smiled, but his eyes shimmered with something deeper than amusement. "Yeah, I remember that too. But I also remember you sitting alone by the fire that night after we went to bed. You thought I didn't see you crying." His words hit me like a gentle wave, soft but unrelenting. I turned to look at him, my breath catching. "You saw that?" He nodded slowly. "I did. And I think about it a lot. I was too young to understand why you were sad back then, but I do now. I know how much you gave up for us after Dad passed. I know you never really had time to grieve." Tears welled in my eyes before I could stop them. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small folded letter. "I wanted to take this trip because I needed to tell you something important, and I didn't know how to do it at home." His hands trembled slightly as he handed it to me. The paper was soft, worn around the edges as if he'd been carrying it for days. I unfolded it, and as I read, my heart ached and swelled all at once. It was a letter of gratitude, simple, raw, and filled with love. He had written about the nights I stayed up helping him study, the sacrifices I made to keep him in school, the way I always smiled even when I was breaking inside. Each word was like a balm on old wounds I didn't know were still open. When I finished reading, I looked up to find him watching me, eyes glistening in the firelight. "I thought you forgot," I whispered. He shook his head. I never forgot, Mom. I just didn't know how to say thank you. He reached over, taking my hand in his, and for a long while, we sat there in silence. The stars above seemed closer, the world softer somehow. In that quiet embrace, years of unspoken love finally found their voice, and I realized this trip wasn't just his surprise, it was his way of giving me back the love I'd poured into him all along.